my phone rang from one of the other guys, and I answered it, and he's on the phone freaking out, man. He's like, dude, you got to come help us, man. You got to come help us. They got us zip tied. They got us in the bathtub. They're going to kill us, man. And so I was like, I said, okay, man, where are y'all at? And he told me what hotel and what room. And I got somebody to bring me to that hotel room, and I told them, drop me off in case this goes bad, y'all leave. And they dropped me off, and I walked up to that hotel room with it all on me, and I knocked on that door not knowing what I was fixing to walk into. And
so that was our guest, Brandon Chatagnier. It's got a hell of a story. Stick around, guys. It's amazing. I promise not to disappoint. In the meantime, hey, if you enjoy our content, if you could go ahead and just give that like button a smash, maybe the subscribe button as well, depending on what platform you're on, throw a comment and share out there. That's how you support us spreading the message, and it means so very, very much to me. I appreciate every single interaction with our content. Also, today's title sponsor is the Yatra Trauma Center here in Krabi, Thailand, where I reside. That is where my healing journey started. And one of the things that they're really fond of saying is that where addiction is the smoke, trauma is the fire. And that very much related, of course, to my story and my journey there at Yatra. But they treat all sorts of different kind of trauma. As a matter of fact, when I was there, I was the only person there dealing with addiction. Everybody else had some other things going on. So if you've got some things that are holding you back in life, you just might be surprised at the cost relative to other private paid treatment options, and you get to come to Thailand. In the event you can't make it all the way over here to Thailand, they do offer some online a la carte kind of services if you're interested. So check them out, guys. You can learn more at a2apodcast.com/trauma. And in the meantime, enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, watchers, listeners, supporters of all kinds. Welcome to another episode of the Ashes to Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Chuck LaFlange, checking in from Krabi, Thailand. Halfway around the world in Louisiana is Brandon Chatagnier. How you doing today, Brandon?
good, man. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's like really hot. It's 4:00 in the morning, and it's still really hot here. So
That's how it is in Louisiana.
hot.
It stays hot here. Hot and
yeah,
humid
right.
year-round.
Yeah, I guess you guys are pretty much on the same temp as we are. So, so Louisiana, of course, we had Nicole on just recently. It's a great story. You guys are kind of unique in some of the things you're doing there. Her story was kind of crazy, right? And I'm sure yours is as well. And we'll definitely talk a little bit about that. Why don't we start out, Brandon, with the first time you remember getting messed up? I've got a couple of follow-up questions to go from there.
Well, you want me to tell you about that night, or?
Yeah.
The way it happened.
Remember how old you were, all that stuff.
Well,
yeah.
I was around 24, 25 years old the first time I ever used. Never used drugs before that, ever.
You guys, the both of you are just this crazy late blooming, right?
Yep. I grew up in a Christian home with good parents. I was raised right. I went to private school. Pretty much everything. I had every advantage in the world that anybody else out there has. I could have gone to college, could have done whatever I wanted to with my life, and I got involved with a girl at the time, and I thought that was who I was supposed to be with, and it was a kind of a rebellion thing. And I got married, and 7 years down the road, and 3 kids later, she left me, and it was a few months after that. It was the first time I ever used drugs, and I had drank in my teens when you're not supposed to, but by the time I hit 21, those things were all over. I was married, and my partying, I was very immature, but I wasn't partying. I was living a married life, but I was just running around with friends and, just not keeping a job. And anyway, my first wife left me, and 2 or 3 months later, I was living in the bars, staying drunk and depressed and down and out. And I went out one night with some friends of mine, my best friend at the time, actually, and somebody had given me a pill, like a Roxy or something, and I took it. And that, in combination with the drinking, I was just really messed up, like bad. And I was belligerent, and I was getting on everyone's nerves at this house party. And my friend, believe it or not, the Roxy wasn't the thing. The opiates never were my thing. My friend was like, man, you're messing up the party. They're going to throw us out of here. Come to the bathroom. I'm going to help you out. So I went with him to the bathroom, and he cut this line of something white out on the counter, and he said, man, just snort that, and you'll be straight. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was cocaine or what. I'd never seen anything. And I had been a police officer. And in my police work, um, I had actually worked some on a street interdiction team and on narcotics. But back then, the big things was cocaine, crack, ecstasy, and marijuana was what we dealt with the most. And I had never really run across. I knew what cocaine was from the movies or whatever, but
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was. And I said, "Okay, sure, man." I snorted it up, and man, it was meth. It was. I was instantly sober, like instantly sober. And I
And with a
remember,
really sore face too, I'll bet, because nothing
yes,
burns like
it
a
burned
oof.
all the way back to the back of my head. I thought
I'll
my
bet
eyeball
it
was falling out. And but I was instantly sober, and I'll never forget walking out of that bathroom uh, from the first time getting high. I walked out the door of that bathroom back into the house, and it almost seemed like I was in a different house.
Before we get too far into the episode, just a quick reminder that the special sponsor for today is FAR Canada. That's Families for Addiction Recovery. They do tons of great work, guys. They offer some group therapy for people who are in similar situations. They also offer a peer-to-peer support system, as well as some real-time support over the phone. And you can learn more about them at farcanada.org. And hey, back to the show.
I remember everything in that house being brighter. I remember every color being brighter, every person being more realistic, everything just seeming more beautiful. Like it was almost like you put on some glasses that made you see a more perfect image of the world around you. That's how my first experience was.
No
When I
kidding.
walked out of that bathroom, I thought to myself, man, this is the most amazing thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I
Wow.
don't know. I think honestly that I was probably hooked that first time. And the reason I say that is, um, I don't know. I don't know what some people qualify as addiction, or whether you're instantly an addict or whatever. But in my opinion, if you can't come down, if you don't want to feel the normal sober again, then you're addicted. And
Fair enough. Yeah.
that's
Right.
pretty much the way it was. About 12 hours later, I found myself in a rocking chair, rocking back and forth, crying my eyes out, not wanting to be alive, saying I need to get back to the way I was. And that was on the
That's
first
addiction.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. Right. Yeah.
instantly,
Yeah. Yeah.
instantly.
Yeah. I would
And
agree. Yeah.
and so it went from there. Here, buy me a little bit more, and just it started off. It became a daily thing at that point.
So, do you think, with the benefit of hindsight, had you not been in that place in life where you were really down, disappointed, like depressed, that it would have had that same allure to you? And I mean, you can
I
only
don't
guess. You can't prove a
honestly.
negative, but right?
Honestly, I don't know if I had not been in that place in my life, in that depressed state, and I guess seeking for something to fill that void. I don't know that I would have ever used drugs to find out whether or not it would have had that allure. I was
Fair
never
enough. Yeah.
around. As a matter of fact, the guy who introduced it to me, he his older brother was my best friend and had been killed in a car wreck. So
Oh,
he became kind of like a little brother to me because he was, back then, that's how it kind of was. But I didn't even know they used. It was that was something that they didn't tell anybody. I didn't know anybody that used drugs. Didn't run around with anybody that used drugs. And so I think it a combination of me being in the state that I was in and coming across it at that exact time
perfect
is
storm kind of thing, right?
the
That's what that
perfect
is.
storm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The devil aligned everything perfect in my life at the time to introduce that demon.
No kidding, eh? No kidding. Um, that's amazing, and at such a late age. So, at that point now, you're instantly, like, it's a daily, everyday thing. You're going right into it from there, right?
Yeah, at that time, I had been divorced, or I guess say separated. My divorce wasn't filed for a year, but I had been separated for 4 or 5 months, and and I had moved into a trailer behind my family's restaurant. They had a business, a restaurant at the time, and we had a trailer behind it, and I moved into there, and I was working for the restaurant because that was always my fallback place. I never could keep a job. I was just too immature. I was one of those kind of people who was like, if the boss said anything funny, I was one of those kind of people who was constantly looking for a reason to quit. And if
Oh,
you're always looking
yeah.
for a reason to quit, you're going to find one.
Absolutely.
There was
Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
there was not a thing about me that was looking for a reason to make it or continue or to
Yeah.
push through. I was always looking for a reason to quit in just about everything that I had going on in my life. So that was my fallback job. I knew I always could go work with my parents, and I was working for them, and it just became a daily thing. I remember um, uh, I would I would get. I mean, back then when I first started, it was small amounts, but I would get like a quarter of a gram, and that would last me, you know, 36 hours just smoking it on foil back then,
Yeah. I
and
remember those
and
days. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
smoking it on foil, and then I'd do some, and I'd go up there and I'd work, and when I'd start to, leave a little bit more, I'd run back to my trailer and a couple hits on the foil and go back to work, and that became my routine. I would work until I got off, and when I got off of work, I'd go back to my trailer and I'd sit back there by myself, like literally by myself, because I didn't know anybody at the time that did meth other than my friend that had introduced me to it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but he worked for his dad as well, and he was probably, I would say, he wasn't a fully functioning addict, but he was a whole lot more functioning than I was. He worked for his dad every day out in the sun, and he never missed work and stuff, but he stayed high all night every night. Well, but that became what my life would be. I would work until I got off of work at 10 or 11 o'clock, and I'd go back and sit in my trailer by myself, and I would smoke meth all night long on the foil, and then occasionally, maybe once a week or so, I'd go out and hang out with them, and um, and I would stay up for 3, 4, 5 days at a time, and then I'd crash out and
Yeah.
sleep all day, and then the cycle would start over again.
Yeah. 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 I know it well. I do know it well. So that's crazy. So how long does that continue for you? Like, how long do you
That
manage
went
to be functioning? Right.
well. I I functioned okay. I would say probably for well, I'm gonna put it like this. I would probably have always remained what someone would consider a functioning addict.
Yep.
What I considered functioning was my ability to maintain my quality of life. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was able to do that for the most of the time that I was in addiction, outside of the aspect of my family and just general society working against me. You know,
Okay.
a lot of the reasons why, as addicts, we become non-functioning is because of the roadblocks that are put in our way because, by family or friends or loved ones or whatever. They find out
Stigma
you're
and
using.
yeah.
When they
Yeah.
find out you're using, oh well, you're fired, or you can't come around or whatever. And those are roadblocks that if they weren't there, you would probably, remain functioning. So I I functioned, I guess you would say, financially decent for a while. But it didn't take long until my family and people around me all knew what was going on, and I was,
Yeah.
I was pretty well ostracized from the circles. But my drug addiction, in your addiction, you think of it as, man, the luckiest guy in the world, but it was actually the worst thing that could possibly have happened. But my addiction, from the day that I used drugs for the very first time, it might have been 2 to 2.5 months before another perfect storm happened in my life.
Okay.
Within 2 or 2.5 months, I knew probably 50, 60, 70 other people that were using meth, on a daily basis. I had stumbled into just about every circle in our area at some point in time, sitting around with this group or that group, whatever. And at about that same time, I find myself sitting across the desk from the person who was the largest meth dealer in the area back then.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, hey, so and so told me about you and said you know a lot of people and that you might could move some of this stuff. So within 2.5 months of the first time I ever used, I was selling. I was dealing dope, and back then that was in the early '90s, and going over there and getting fronted an ounce a day, that was a lot, back then. And so
that was a lot back
every morning.
Yeah.
Every morning it was 6 o'clock in the morning. We had to be there and turn our money in, and he'd give us a fresh ounce, and we'd leave. And that happened just a couple of months in. So I went from a using addict to dealing instantly, and then that's how I spent the next. I had 13 years of addiction, but I had a 4-year break in between.
Okay.
But that's how I spent all of my addiction after that, was dealing.
I understand. For me, it was a fallback for 20 some years, right?
Yeah.
You do fine, you get a job, you'd be fine for a while. Something to go wrong, I can always go back to this, right?
That's all I did. I poured my life into it. I had nothing else in my mind. I didn't have anything else to live for. I had lost my family. I had lost my wife. Once my parents found out and I was kind of ostracized, that was it. I immersed myself into that life, and I was. That's all I did. I didn't have no job. I didn't nothing, and that was to my detriment. Which, now I look back on it and say that it was how God kept me alive. But not having a job, but at the same time having 2 apartments and 2 cars and always having money, the cops know you're not they know you're up to no good,
Exactly.
And so
right.
And then the fact that I was an ex-police officer and they all knew me, that was, I was just on their radar from day one. So I spent probably 10 years just playing the cat and mouse game. Back in 2005, I held the record in our parish, which is like a county, the most arrests in 1 year. I had 21 arrests in 1 year, and just in and out of jail. But that's basically how I spent my time from 2002 to the end of 2006.
Yeah, no kidding, eh?
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy. So, well, I'll let you keep telling. Like, I do kind of want to circle back. An ex-cop. So, can we talk about that? What happened?
Yeah.
There.
Well,
I mean, that's an interesting part of your story, right? So,
it is. And I don't remember even how. I don't remember exactly what it was that enticed me to want to go down the road of police officer, but I think it was because of an acquaintance that I had in the small town that I lived at the time. I was talking to him, maybe it was about work, needing a job or something. And he told me that local police department was looking for a police officer, and they were a smaller municipality where I started out, and basically the way it worked to get a job as a police officer, you had to go before the city council and they voted, and if they voted for you, then you got the job. And he was on the city council. Yeah. So
that's going back a ways.
Yeah. So myself and another guy went before the city council, and the guy who had told me about it that was on the council, he was the one that basically tipped the scale, and I got the job, and I spent just almost 4 years doing law enforcement. 2007 to 97 to 2001.
Okay.
And I did good. I went to police academy. I was a post-certified officer. As a matter of fact, I won the award in the police academy for the highest score. And I worked in my law enforcement I worked for 4 different departments, 3 of them all at the same time. I was working full time at one and moonlighting on the street interdiction team, narcotics team for 2 other ones. And
No kidding. Yeah.
and it was just, man, I got fired, and it was it really wasn't because I had done anything wrong, but it was because it was something that what I had done was going to, they were going to try to make an example. And I'll be honest with you. I'll be transparent. Your viewers will probably like this, but we had gone to a strip club, and me and another officer off duty, and we
Yeah.
picked up these 2 strippers and we brought them back to his apartment, and we proceeded to do all sorts of stuff with them. Nothing illegal, but the things you do with strippers. And I decided, I had this brilliant idea. Nobody's ever going to believe this. We need to take some pictures. And the only camera that I could find was the one in my police unit. It was my police camera. So I went outside and I got it, and I came inside, and we took all these pictures of us with these girls in these very compromising positions. And I forgot to take the film out of it. Back then you had film. I forgot. And in that, at that time, the way it was we didn't have take home units. You keep your patrol unit for your 12-hour shift, and then the next guy coming on would use it until you came back home. And however it happens, I forgot about it, but they took that film to get it developed, and they brought it to Walmart, where they got it developed at the time. And Walmart sees all these pictures coming across of 2 police officers, 2 strippers wearing the police officers' uniforms, and just it was really bad. And so the chief of police shows up at my house, and he knocks on the door, and he's like, "Look, man, I'm just here to tell you, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything illegal. But Walmart,
But
they
you done
want
something
ahead.
dumb.
They're going to go to the press with this if you don't, so you got to resign or you get fired." So I resigned. And that was that.
It was the uniforms. It was them putting on the uniforms. I think that was probably the nail in the proverbial coffin there, right? Holy cow. So, wow. Okay. So I'm glad that we talked about that then. So, okay. So why don't you take us back into your story wherever you want to pick up, and we'll kind of go from there. How's that sound?
Well, I call it my first round with addiction. That went from 2002 to 2006. And like I said, early on, I started dealing, and I sold a lot of meth, man, in this area. Everybody knew me, and I felt like a rock star, but that's only because we're blinded by the fact that they love what's in our pocket. They don't love us, But anyway, 2000 sometime in 2005, that time was spent just like probably anybody else who's using and dealing meth. I mean, I could probably tell 100 stories, and they're all going to sound similar to somebody else's. I had some really dark nights. I did a lot of stupid things. I was a thief, a liar, a womanizer. I did it all. And I sometime during 2005, I spent one night at a girl's house that they were having a party with some people over, and I was there with my girlfriend, and it was her friend and a bunch of other people. Well, at the end of the night, when it all came to a close, everybody had left except for my girlfriend and her friend. And I don't remember what was going on. I was sitting in the bedroom or something, and they were in the living room talking, and it got quiet, and I was wondering what was going on. So I went in the living room, and the 2 of them were sitting there, and they had everything out on the coffee table, trying to shoot up. And at that point in time, I had never shot up before. They had never shot up before. We had only done it, smoked it or snorting it or eating it, whatever. But anyway, but I had spent a tremendous amount of time with somebody who did shoot up, and I had watched it very closely so many times that I knew how to do it.
Yeah.
And so, being a smart aleck, I thought that I was going to show off and be like, "Oh man, let me show y'all how to do that," you know. And so I made one up, and man, I did it. And when I did that, that day it changed everything.
Yeah.
I really couldn't get high any other way after that. I instantly became hooked on the needle, and whenever that happened, I I tell people, and it's in my book, but I tell people that at that particular moment in time, I was doing as good as I thought anybody out there who was living my life could be doing. I had two apartments. I had one that I was paying for that was clean and neat and whatnot. And that's
Yep.
where I was at when my kids came to stay and my Christian girlfriend came to see me at, which she had left me by that point. But still, I had this apartment. And then I had another apartment that was like a trap house, you know,
Yep.
and I had two cars. I always had a pocket full of cash. I always had dope. I mean, it was everything was going good, and I put that needle in my arm, man. And in less than 8 months' time, I lost everything. Everything. I got evicted from my apartments. Both of my cars got seized or impounded. I lost. I didn't have anywhere to live. I was walking the streets. Um, the only thing that I didn't lose was my drug connection. Um, but I lost all respect, even from the drug community. Like I became worthless, and that all came to a crashing end one night. I was walking the street, and all I had was dope. And I had been out on the street for days. I had been up for days. I ain't had a shower or change of clothes in days. It was bad. I stunk, and but I had drugs, you know. So I went to a guy's house that I had been friends with for a long time, even from before my addiction. I knocked on his door, and he was a user too, a bad user. And I went to his house specifically because I know if I give him some dope, he's gonna let me get a shower, you know. And he didn't. He opened the door, and I was like, "Man, look, I got this here. Just let me get a shower and clean up, change clothes, and I'll be out of here." And he's like, "Nah, bro, you can't come in, man. You smell too bad, and you know." I had become worthless, and when he closed that door and I walked away from there, that was it for me. That was the end. I said, "Man, that this is over with. I got to get help because I I I don't have nothing left." And I walked from his house about a mile up the road to where our Coliseum is here, and I went down and around there behind it, and I sat down on a big pile of rocks where they were doing construction, and I called my mom. And I said, "Mom, I need help." I said, I can't live like this anymore. I said, "It's going to kill me." And she said, "I'm not coming over there, but I'll send somebody to help you." And she sent someone who's a friend of our family for a long time. And he picked me up and he prayed with me. And he said, "Look, I'm not even bringing you to your mom and dad's. I'm going to bring you out of town to a preacher friend that we knew, a mutual friend." He said, "I've already called him. He's going to let you go down there and stay as long as you need to stay until you get sober." And that's what I did. He brought me down to South Louisiana, and I moved into the preacher's spare bedroom. I worked around his church, keeping the church clean and mowing the grass and stuff like that. And I just spent a few months down there getting sober or staying sober. I was sober by the time I left Alexandria, but I spent a few months down there, and then I came back to Alexandria clean and sober, and I just didn't go back. I didn't go back to the people, the life, or nothing.
Yep.
Uh, I got me a job, and man, it wasn't long. I met another girl, and that was another just catastrophe waiting to happen. I wasn't ready in any kind of way, but I met this girl. I asked her out on a date. She was like, "Yeah, let's go out." I picked her up that night. The first night we went out, I picked her up. We went to eat. and we were supposed to go to eat and go to a club, and then we were going to get a hotel room. Well, we went and ate, and we went to the hotel room to check in first, and then we were
Yeah.
going to go to the club, and wound up sleeping with her before we ever even went to the club and got her pregnant the first night we were together, the first
Oh
date we
dear.
ever went on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so I bit the bullet, and I was like, I'm gonna do the right thing, and I'll marry you and whatever. And so that started my second marriage, and that that was that introduced two more kids into my life, and two more daughters. I have five daughters. Uh,
Holy.
that in, that introduced two more daughters into my life, and there was a period of time, maybe 2 years, where where everything was okay.
Yeah.
Not even going to say it was great. It was just okay considering the circumstances, considering that I had come out of addiction. I had met a girl, got her pregnant, married her all of a sudden. It was going okay. I got a job in the oil field. I was working offshore. I was making good money. We had a place to live, had nice vehicles, and stuff was going good. And that went on for a couple of years, and then the bottom fell out of the oil, the
Oh,
oil
okay.
industry,
Yeah.
and 30,000 people across the Gulf of Mexico got laid off, and I was one of them.
Yeah.
And I came back home, and I could not find any work. I could find work, but not making $90,000 working 6 months a year.
Yeah.
I had been making too much money, and I came back here, and none of those skills translate into anything local. I couldn't use the oil and gas skills on land anywhere, and I couldn't make the right kind of money. So things started getting really tough financially. And sometime around that same period of time, the woman that I was with decided that she wanted to be seeing other people, and she had an addiction problem as well. Pills at the time. I wasn't using or anything. Um, I had gotten hurt in the oil field, and I was on pain management, taking opiates. But even with the opiates that I was taking, Lortabs, they were giving me 120 a month, and even probably 75% of those I was giving to my wife. I've never been an opiate person. I just,
Yeah. Me neither.
I
Yeah.
mean, if
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
have them for pain, then I'll take them. But there's not nothing that anybody ever has to worry about me being addicted to. I just wasn't. I was
Yeah.
a speed freak. And but anyway, I stayed sober all that time, um, and but between what I was going through with my wife and the fact that I got laid off offshore and I couldn't find money, I'm starting to lose things. They wanting to repo my truck. I didn't have my camper repoed. Just everything's going south, and I just I can't blame anybody.
Yeah.
I cannot blame anybody for my second round with addiction, because
Yeah.
that new perfect storm that was creating and brewing in my life at the time led me to the living room one night with my second wife and sitting down and making the conscious decision, talking about it, discussing it, going over all the factors, basically giving her what I called at the time Meth 101, telling her everything there was that you could possibly know about meth, how it works, how it makes you feel, how to sell it, who to sell it, and just everything you could possibly know about meth. I told her about, and sat there in that living room in my own freaking ignorance and made the conscious decision, this is how I'm going to get us out of a bind. I know somebody I can go to right now, and they'll front me some dope, and I'll just hit it real hard and go
Hustle.
find some
Hustle.
of my
Yeah.
old people and hustle, and I'll get it and make some money. And she was like, okay, let's try it. Well, but I made up my mind then and there. I said, I'm only going to deal it. I'm not going to use any. I'm only going to sell it, and this is going to be to make money. And I really did good sticking with that till like the next morning, and then that changed. but
Yeah.
I did good for 12
Yeah.
hours. I know.
Yeah.
But
I know.
anyway, it started right back to, I just fell right back in. I mean, I probably, probably 75% of the people who I had been messing with before, they were all still using. So I just
Yeah.
jumped back in there and started selling to all of them
Hmm.
and took right back off. Well, adding that to a marriage that already wasn't, it was just a marriage. I married her
Yeah.
because she was pregnant, and it never was anything where there was any kind of major being in love, and it was never right. It was never good. It was just okay.
Yeah.
And so we added that to it, and that just, it started a downward spiral. And it wasn't long till we were separated. She took off with one of the dudes I was messing with, and it just, that whole thing crashed. And when that second marriage failed, even though I was already using again and back in addiction um and dealing again, when that second marriage failed, it 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 devastated me again, but not the same way as my first wife. My first wife was young love, and this second one was more of a devastation to me because I felt like a failure, because I felt like I had failed at making something work. Because remember, I went into this saying I'm going to do the right thing and be a
Yeah.
dad, and I'm going to step up. Well, now when this fell apart, I felt like a failure. I felt like I had failed, and I got these two young kids. One of them is I don't remember their ages at the time, but I got these two young kids, and I just felt like I had failed. And not only had I failed at keeping a marriage together and being a dad, but the way it fell apart by her leaving me for somebody else in the drug game, and and when she leaves me, she goes to selling dope with somebody else, and I felt like I failed as the man in the dope game too. I couldn't even keep my
Yeah.
girl, and it just, I just felt like a failure. And so that kind of pushed me over the edge. And I remember at that time, like I said, I was already using again and dealing again. But when that happened, I remember saying, you know what? Screw it. I'm going all in. I'm going
Yeah.
all in. I'm going to go as hard as I can, as long as I can, with as much dope as I can, get as big as I can until it all comes crashing down. And that's what I did. I just dove into it.
Yeah.
And I wound up around. I'll tell you one more story, because I don't like to glorify it, but I I I wound up with me and a buddy and the two girls that we were, I guess, sleeping with at the time. Got a hotel room one night, and
Yeah.
we're sitting in the hotel room at probably 2 o'clock in the morning. There's boom, 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 banging on the door. Man, it scared us. We jumped up, looked through the hole, and it was another fella that we knew. And so I opened up the door, and the other guy, he's like, "Hey man, I need to borrow one of y'all's car." And or it was my buddy's car. I had lost mine at the time, but he was like, "Yeah." He said, "I need to borrow your car, man. I just seen somebody go across the highway and stash something off in the woods. I want to go over there and see what it is." So we was like, "Okay." So he takes the car, he leaves. We shut the door and everything. And man, it ain't 8 or 10 minutes goes by. Boom, boom, boom. A knock on the door. We run back over there, and he comes in the hotel room, and he's got a box, and he's got something long wrapped up in a blanket, and he throws it on the bed, and he rolls the blanket out, and it's a brand new police issue Benelli shotgun, and the box is a cardboard box, and he opens it up, and inside of it's a fireproof safe. And we go out to the car, and we get crowbars, and we pry in and break open that safe, and the safe has a kilo of meth in it, 2.2 pounds of meth in it. Shards that long, I kid you not, huge Mexican dope. And I said, man, the Benelli didn't shock me. When he opened that box up, I said, dude, you just got us killed. Nobody is going to come up short a kilo of meth in this area and not be
Yeah.
looking for somebody to kill. I said, so you can scratch leaving here with this. So I
Yeah.
said, I'm taking this, and I took out about like that handful of it. I want to say I took out about 15 ounces, nearly a pound.
Yeah.
And the guy who I was in the room with, he done the same thing, grabbed him a whole pile of it. And then the third fella, he took the rest and left. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're splitting up. We're not saying nobody's names. You go one place. I'm going somewhere and hide out. We're going to lay low. We're disappearing.
Yeah.
And so I came back to town. I picked up a different girl. I went and got a hotel room. I had her get it in her name. It's out in a different town. And I go up in that hotel room. We locked ourselves in and barricaded the door, you know.
Yeah.
And man, I don't think 8 hours went by, and my phone rang from one of the other guys, and I answered it, and he's on the phone freaking out, man. He's like, dude, you got to come help us, man. You got to come help us. They got us zip tied. They got us in the bathtub. They're going to kill us, man. And so I was like, I said, okay, man, where are y'all at? And he told me what hotel and what room. And just, I was all, even in my addiction, even at my worst, I was always a person who was going to try to do the right thing. That's just how, especially with the people with the dope. And so I did. I took everything that I had taken out of that box, and I packed it up. I drove over. I got somebody to bring me to that hotel room, and I told them, drop me off in case this goes bad. Y'all leave. And they dropped me off, and I walked up to that hotel room with it all on me, and I knocked on that door, not knowing what I was fixing to walk into. And the person that opened the door was somebody that I had sold dope with 10 years earlier, when I was selling dope for that big dude way back then. And he opened the door and he goes, Brandon, what's the deal, bro? I didn't know you had anything to do with this. I said, I don't. I said, but here's what I took of what y'all had. And so they brought me in the hotel room, and they were cool with me. They said, man, we just
Oof.
admire the fact that you showed back up over here with our drugs, man. And I said, hey, bro, that's the kind of person I am. They don't belong to me. And so I said, there it is. And they said, well, here's the deal. These other two knuckleheads, they had found both of them, and they were miles away from there. They had found both of them. And but when they found them, they didn't have the dope. And they told me, they said, look, man, this dope was fronted to us by cartel. We had to pay this amount of money in 7 days, or somebody's dying. They said, we need this dope back. And I said, well, if you'll take the little one that's in there that y'all got zipped, they had them zip tied in a bathtub with plastic on the floor. And I said, if you'll give me that little dude that's in there, because he owns the car, so I'll have a driver, I'll go find your dope. And they said, all right. So they let him loose. They gave him. We went outside, jumped in a car, and we took off. And it probably wasn't 5 or 6 hours. I came back to that hotel room with every bit of that dope except for about 2 ounces of a kilo. And they were like, "Man, that's straight." And I said, "Not only here's your drugs back," I said, "but if you'll front that to me an ounce at a time, I'll sell all of it for you, so you have your money and whatever." And and I did that in about 2 days.
Oh
I
shit. Eh?
sold every bit of it until I got busted. And
Yeah.
that is, and I can't show you, but I sold all of it, and I had 68 grams left. And I was sitting in somebody's house, and the U.S. Marshals, Violent Offender Task Force, showed up, and they came and banged on the door, and I went and answered the door, and they said, wait, no, I got my timing off. Anyway, I got busted with 68 grams of dope, and and they wanted to charge me with possession, distribution, trafficking, manufacturing, and paraphernalia. And that was where everything came to a screeching halt. I said I got my timing mixed up because that was later on down the road. That wasn't from that drug, that dope.
Yeah.
I sold all of that dope. As a matter of fact, I sold all of that, and that was the perfect storm that I was telling you about. I sold all of that, and when the guy went to re-up, he said, "Look, I got him all his money in about 5 days. He had a couple of days to spare." And he was like, "Look, I got to go re-up, man." But he said, "But if you'll hang tight when I come back, we can do this again." And I told him, I said, "Look, man, you seen how fast I moved that?" I said, you and I are obviously at the same level. I'm not
Yeah.
going to do anything but get on your nerves with you having to provide for me and what you would normally get rid of. I said, so why don't you just introduce me to the people? Let that be how you pay me back for
Yeah.
getting rid of this and being, staying straight with you. And so he introduced me to him, and that was a scary experience in itself. I basically sold my soul to the devil that day. When I sat down with him, and they pointed out to me all the ways that they could make my life and my family pay if I didn't come back with their drugs. But I didn't care, I was sold out to it.
Yeah.
And that led to, it wasn't very long after that I got busted, and it all came just to a screeching halt. They wanted to charge me with possession, distribution, manufacturing, trafficking, and paraphernalia. And I sat in jail for 80 something days begging my family to help me because that was going to be a lot of time. But fortunately, it was my first felony. It was going to be my first conviction. Well, I had a DA that I guess he saw something in me, and he said, "I'll tell you what." He said, "If you'll go to a year-long rehab and you complete it and you stay clean, then I'll table these charges. And provided that you stay
Wow.
clean and you complete it, we'll make them go away." And I said,
Yeah.
"You got it." And
Wow.
that started the path that I'm on today.
Okay.
7
Okay. Well,
years ago.
let's talk about that path, right? So 7 years ago, you get clean. 12 step in it. I assume if you're in a rehab, usually that's what it's
Well,
about.
no, this was a Baptist faith-based rehab up
Okay.
in North Louisiana, and it was a really, really, really harsh experience. The It was in an old school that had been closed down for many years, and this guy had taken it and turned it into, he called it a freedom mission, and there was about 80 of us in there.
Yep.
He had converted the classroom into dorm rooms, and we were piled in it. They didn't have bunk beds, but at the same time they had a twin bed with an egg carton or milk
Yeah.
carton,
Milk
and
crate. Yeah.
another
Yeah.
twin bed and a milk crate, and another twin bed and a milk crate. I mean, if you rolled over in the night and you held your arm out, you were going to lay it on top of somebody else. I mean, it was no air conditioning, no heat, no hot water. It was so harsh, and the
No
guy
kidding.
who ran it had to be one of the meanest old pricks that I think I ever come across in my life. Every time he spoke to you, he talked down to you. We had to work every day. We didn't get paid. I mean, it was a miserable experience. But when I went into that place with my mind made up that come what may, I'm going to get whatever God has for me out of this experience. And I'm going to try to take every single thing that happens to me while I'm here. I'm going to try to find or figure out what it is about my life that this treatment is going to help me with.
Yeah.
And so having that attitude made it different. It made it all different. Every time I got talked down to, I applied that to my life. And later on in life, after I was gone from there, I look back on those times when I'm dealing with people in life today and someone talks down at me. I think to myself, hey, I'm strong and I can handle that because of what I went through back then.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I put in the work and I had the right attitude. So because of that experience, it was a very, very, very humbling experience. And because of that, it taught me over a year's time just how much I could do without, just how much I could live without, just how bad it could possibly be, so that whenever I got out to the free world, I wasn't constantly being let down. One of the biggest problems that the mainstream recovery industry has today is that they create this idea of recovery or of sobriety, that it is going to give you this better life, and everything's going to be better, and everything's going to be hunky-dory, and people are going to help you, and everybody's going to love you because you're sober. And boy, have you got a rude awakening if you go into it believing that. And we wonder why there's so much relapse, and it's because people go into it thinking that. They go into it with a chip on their shoulder, and I don't take away from the fact that overcoming addiction, or at least putting the drugs down, might have been the hardest thing you ever did in your life. But one of the things that I teach my guys all the time, and I hope I'm not getting off track with you, but one of the things that I teach my guys all the time is, oh Lord, I just got myself off track. Completely lost my frame of thought.
I do that to myself all the time.
But thinking everything's going to be perfect, and thinking everything's going to be hunky-dory. And I realized that while laying the drugs down may be the hardest thing that you've ever overcome in your life, it does not make you special.
No.
It makes you no more special than any 10-year-old kid out there, because they wake up sober every morning too.
Yeah.
All it does is make you normal. And you're not even quite normal yet, because you ain't got a job yet. You still ain't got a place to live. You still don't have anything back that you lost in your addiction. All you are is sober. You're no better. You're no more special than any homeless sober person. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And
absolutely, I do.
I don't want to take anything away from the fact that you've overcome this hard challenge of giving up drugs, but at the same time, you're not special. Yeah. And if you'll get that out of your mind and quit thinking that everybody owes you something, or that everybody's got to treat you special, or that we've created this idea. I don't know. We're pumping out really soft people in recovery, and I'm disappointed with that. I have to be very careful with how I say this. I believe in the 12 steps, no argument. I believe in them 100%. I believe, and let me tell you real quick why I believe in them. I never one time cracked open the big book and read the 12 steps, ever. Never read them, never worked with a sponsor. I never did any of that stuff. But I went through that year-long rehab. I learned how to cope. I learned the things that I needed to do in life to get myself back on track and to recover my life. And when I came back home, I spent my first year applying those things that I had learned to my life. And I spent my first year truly seeking God, truly committed to being sober, and truly committed to recovering everything I had lost in my addiction. And about a year after being home, my wife and I met Nicole after all of this. We met several months after I got home, but a year into, it would have been 2 years into my sobriety, but a year after I got home from rehab, I'm sitting in a meeting one night. I was going to AA meetings. I'm sitting in a meeting one night, and I opened the big book for the first time, because I was just going to the meetings to go, just because I didn't have nothing else to do. But I opened the big book for the first time, and I read those 12 steps. 2 years into my sobriety, I read them for the first time. And when I read them, it was like a light turned on, and I said, man, I have done every single one of these things on these 12 steps naturally, on my own, without even knowing it, simply because I was truly committed to recovery. I was truly committed to doing what God wanted me to do in my life, and I was truly committed to staying sober. You can't do those three things without working those steps, because God is going to lead you to make amends. God's going to lead you to apologize. He's going to lead you to do an inventory of your life. When you're truly submitted to God, He's going to lead you down that same road. So I believe 100% in the 12 steps. But at the same time, as far as I'm concerned, you can throw the rest of the big book away. Just give me the 12 steps. Because I feel like while I was in rehab, I had a couple of moments, and we're about to run out of time, man, but I'll tell you about them real quick.
Please do. Yeah. We can go over it. It's fine.
One of the moments while I was in rehab early on, I had gone to God personally, on a personal, went and found me a private place, and I got on my knees and I prayed, and I told God that I was sorry for how I lived, and I asked for forgiveness, and I recommitted myself to live for Him, and I was praying every day, but I was so bound by guilt,
Yeah.
so bound by guilt that I could not focus on anything. I had I I couldn't read my Bible without the memories and the thoughts from my addiction plaguing me, just a memory of some girl or some night or some this and that. I just couldn't. And I was begging God, God, please take this away from me. Please take this away from me. And one day I feel like He spoke to me as I mean, I've never felt more sure about anything in my life, but He said, get a notebook and start writing, and write every single thing you can remember from the first time you used drugs to today. Everything you can remember, don't care how long it takes, just get it out and start writing. And I did that. I took
Yeah.
out a notebook and I started writing, and I wrote for days. Man, I sat and wrote every story, every memory, everything that I went through. I wrote it all down on paper. And when I closed that notebook, I never had those memories again. God took them from me like that.
Wow.
I never was distracted by the thoughts or the memories. It was gone.
Yeah.
And that in itself was amazing for me. I put that notebook in my locker at that rehab, but I was still dealing with the guilt and the shame, because I didn't tell you about this. I didn't tell you much about my younger childhood, but when I was 13 years old, I was like I said, I grew up in a Christian home, God-fearing parents. We went to church 3 times a week. But at 13 years old, I was in a prayer meeting one morning early before daylight, and I was praying, and I felt the call of God on my life, and I didn't know how to handle it at that time. A few days later, I had a woman that was used by God. She came to me and she said, I'm here to tell you that God has called you. And she confirmed that calling. And it scared me to death, because back then, as a kid, we just thought that if you were called, that meant you had to be a preacher. You had to be a
Yeah.
pastor. That's what I thought it
Yeah.
meant. And that scared me to death, because I was scared to talk in front of people. I couldn't talk in front of crowds. I mean, so I ran
it's
from it.
it's kind of
I
hard to
ran.
imagine a version of you that doesn't like
Yeah.
to talk.
so so I ran from it, and I never revisited that again until I was in
Yeah.
rehab. And
Yeah.
after God removed all that burden from me, I started feeling this tremendous guilt for running from God for all those years. And
Yeah.
the guilt was just killing me. And I was praying and I was asking God every day, please, God, forgive me. Please forgive me. I felt so bad. And again, the second time, it's
Yeah.
like He spoke to me again, and He said, I didn't call you at 13 to do something when you were 13. I called you at 13 to do what you're about to do, but I've had to prepare you for it.
Wow.
And at that moment in time, I knew that God wanted me to leave that rehab and go do something for Him
Mm.
to help others recover their lives from addiction. So
Yeah.
that's what I've done for the last 5.5 years now. But I was saying all that to, as far as what I think about AA, I'm not big on AA, but I do believe in the 12 steps. And the reason that I feel that way is because I feel like what I went through, God kept me through, and God kept His hand on my life all the way through my addiction. And He allowed me to live through it, experience it, and come out of it to serve a purpose for Him.
Yeah.
And I feel like what I'm doing now is a ministry that He's called me to. And
Okay.
while I believe that anybody out there that feels like they need to help addicts or work with addicts, and it is just something that they want to do because they love them, or because of if that's what they want to do as a job or career, whatever it is in the secular industry, go for it. If the AA, the big book, the whatever you got to use, whatever kind of secular path you want to take, that's fine. And I don't trash anybody for that. But if you feel like you are called by God to minister in the aspect of recovery, then leaving the Word of God, in my opinion, is just wrong. I don't need anything other than the Bible, and I can point you to the 12 steps in the Bible. I don't need another book. That book has sufficed for 2,000 years. I don't need another one. So that's the only reason why I stay away from the big book. I don't tell people not to read it. I don't tell people not to work steps. I don't bash people who do that. But here's the problem that I see with so many people. For them, that particular path becomes their religion. It becomes they're indoctrinated into it. They will quote that book. They will memorize it. They learn everything out of it, and they sit there and they read it. Tell each other. And the way I feel about it is, if you have that book and you have the Word of God, and you surrender your life to the Word of God the same way you are that book, I promise you the results are going to be even greater. I believe that. That's just what I believe, that you can. The truth of the matter is if you surrender and you submit everything about yourself to the things that are in the pages of the big book, absolutely, you're going to stay sober. You're going to do good. You're going to stay on that path of recovery, but you're doing it of your own power and of your own ability to follow what's in that. With the Word of God, if you surrender to it and you submit to it the same way, you're doing it with your power and with the power that comes from it. Because there's a power in those pages. There's a power in those words. That's about 2 years ago in our recovery program, I came up with a concept that I've been teaching my guys, and I'd love to share it with you right now. And it's called removing the ifs.
Okay.
And whenever an addict first decides, I'm going to get sober, I want to get sober and I want to leave this life behind me, they are told, and then also on their own, they come up with a list that you could write down of all the ifs that they need to stay sober.
Yeah.
If I go to 90 meetings in 90 days, if I always stay talking to a sponsor, if I always work the steps, if I go to church, if my kids accept me back in their life, if my parents accept me back, if I have a job, if I'll stay sober.
Yeah.
And myself personally, I had to go down a path where I went down that list, and everything on that list is important, especially early on in recovery. Those things have to be done. But until I was able to remove each one of those ifs, my sobriety was owned by each one of those ifs.
Yeah.
If my kids bailed on me, I would have went and got high. If I quit going to church, I'd have went and got high. If I quit going to meetings, I'd have went and got high. So I had to remove each one of those ifs until I got to the point where I said, I will stay sober, period.
Yeah. Standalone
no
statement,
ifs.
right?
No ifs. Yeah. I'm going to stay sober whether I go to meetings or not, whether I go to a church or not, that's whenever you own it. That's when you own your sobriety. Nobody, and listen, I've had so much pushback from that because the recovery industry don't want you to rely on yourself. They want you to rely on them, on keep coming back, on whatever. And I believe, like I said, that stuff is important, but there is a point where you can be free. There is a point where you can walk away from recovery and never look back. Because the way I feel about this is, and I know people will argue about this, but the way I feel about it is like this. As long as you are still working recovery or revisiting anything about your addiction, you're still in that addiction.
Yeah.
You're just sober. But you're still living that addiction. You're still talking about it every day. You're still thinking about it every day. You are still dealing with that addiction. I firmly believe that there was a point in time where I walked away from recovery completely for myself. my recovery. Completely walked away from it, closed that chapter in my life. Recovery was a step, and I moved on. And from that day forward to today and through my future, if I ever pick up and start using again and become an addict again, it'll be a whole different addiction than my last one. It ain't because I'm still an addict right now. And it was just sitting there waiting to come back. That's just how I feel. That's how I have to live. I even talked to God, man. And some people think that this is a little bit edgy, but I told God, I said, God, with or without you, I'm staying sober. And the reason why I said that was because I read the book of Job.
Yeah.
I know that there's a possible day in my future that I may not be able to find God. I may not feel God. And in that day, I'm still committed to staying sober. I made up my mind that I might rob banks, kill people. There ain't no telling what I'll do. I might curse God and die, but when I get to hell, I'll be sober. So that's me in a nutshell, man. I know we've gone over a little bit. But
that's okay. That's okay. Hey, listen. I know you've got a book. Let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
What's the book called? Where can people get it? And of course, we'll put it in the thing. But
My Crystal Romance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you see, that's me on the front right there. I got the formula for meth tattooed on my back. I was really in
geez.
it. But you can get it on Amazon.
Yeah. Of course,
Nicole
we'll
and
have
I
that on the page too. So the link.
She has it on her snip feed, and we're working on getting the website up and going. But you can get it right now on Amazon.
Great. Great.
It tells all the details of everything we just talked about up to the day that basically up to a little bit after I got out of rehab.
Yeah.
When we started our first program.
Okay. Great. And of course, you also have your recovery house or your sober living, I guess it is, right? Right.
Yes. 5 years ago, I walked away from my job. I went to my boss and I said, look, I'm going to do what I think God wants me to do. And when I tell you that I could not have married a more perfect person for myself, for my life, for my recovery, for everything, Nicole has been my rock from day one. And when I went to her, I mean, she could look, we were both ex-addicts. We were both trying to rebuild our lives. We were both starting out. She had, she's told you the issues that she's had about her kid and different things. And just, there was so much going on in our lives at the time. The last thing I needed to do was quit a full-time job and decide that I'm going to go work with a bunch of junkies. But I went to her and I said, look, this is what I think God wants me to do. And I need to do it. And she's been behind me ever since, man. And we started our first program. I bought my first sober living house 5 years ago, and I grew that to, I was opening my fourth house when COVID hit. And I had 30 some odd men in our houses, and COVID hit, and it just, man, addicts ran with it. They used that as an excuse to quit their jobs, to relapse, to whatever, and it just, everything kind of tanked. So I said, you know what? I would rather go back down to having one house and really be able to focus on spending the time with these 10 men than to have all these guys that I can't spend time with. So we did that. I dialed it back to one home, and we did that. I also own a lawn and landscaping service that I use to support the guys in our program and give them an outlet to work. And that's what I do full time, work with addicts and mow grass.
That's
our
awesome.
New program is Revi Recovery Center. We have a Facebook page, but it is we named it Revi as that's redeemed and victorious. Nicole Victorious, and my first email address when I got out of rehab was BeRedeemed75. So I've gone with the redemption path ever since I started, and she's gone with the victorious. So we combined them to make Revi.
I love it. Love it.
That's our new program, and it is a program where we do our best to recover people's lives and recover people's lawns.
Grown.
Yeah.
Love it. I love it. I love it. So, listen, we are over the hour mark now. So why don't we do what's my favorite part of the show, and that's the daily gratitudes. So what you got for us
Yeah.
that you're grateful for today, Brandon? Yeah.
Man, I am grateful for, first of all, I'm grateful for my wife that has stuck with me and that has helped me and has motivated me every day to keep going. And I'm grateful that God has allowed me to understand and to see him as he truly is, because my misconceptions of God as I was raised, um, really were hindering me. And by me being at him to show himself to me as he is, I'm very grateful of that, because it has allowed me to know and realize what I'm accountable for and what he's accountable for. And we would be really surprised to learn how much more of it is on us than is on him.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
We want to
Yeah.
blame the devil for so much. And the truth of the matter is, the devil ain't got nothing to do with a lot of it. I see people all the time saying, God, please make me sober. God, please help me get sober. Or sometimes they even, and I understand the idea behind it, but they'll say, thank God for one more day sober. Well, the truth of the matter is if God could ever make you sober, you'd have never been high in the first place. It ain't up to him.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah.
free will. Take
Yeah.
accountability for it. And that's and
Yeah.
that's what he's allowed me to see, is I'm responsible for that. And
Yeah.
then give him praise and him worship for carrying me through another day.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
That's what
I
I'm
love it.
most grateful for, my wife and my God.
Awesome. That's awesome. Myself, I'm grateful for another awesome conversation. You've got a vibe, an energy about you. I love it, man. I love it.
Yeah.
All hope and no dope, right?
Yep.
I'm also grateful to every single person who continues to like, comment, share, support, listen, talk about the show, the platform. We're growing really, really fast. Of course, hit that subscribe button down at the bottom, do all those things. Because every time you do these things, you get me a little bit closer to living my best life. My best life is to continue making a humble living, spreading the message. The message is this: if you're in active addiction right now, today could be the day. Today could be the day that you start that lifelong journey. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, call into detox, go to a meeting, pray, go to church. I don't care. Do whatever it is you got to do to get that journey started, because it is so much better than the alternative. And
Yep.
if you have a loved one who's suffering an addiction right now, just taking the time to listen to our conversation, if you just take one more minute out of your day and text that person, let them know they are loved. Use the words,
You are loved.
that little glimmer of hope just might be the thing that brings them back.